Are you worried that they're watching when they're not supposed to be?
Yeah.
What?
Do you think
Did you say your
that's
son did
possible?
that?
Like with the
No.
Mac?
Yeah, especially my son does that.
I'm too sure.
When he's surfing Reddit, he doesn't want to be looked at.
I kind of want to do that.
It's a legitimate concern. You don't know they can do that?
I think that they can, yeah, but I guess I just stopped thinking
Alright.
about it. That was my initial.
Okay, let's do this.
All right.
Okay, my name is Jay Stang. I'm a delegate from the 22nd District of Texas. I'm a national delegate. I'm also, Stuart and I work together on a lot of projects. I'm on the board of directors of Oathkeepers, and I'm also the incoming Texas chapter president. We're all here in Tampa for the convention. We've all got different jobs to do. Mine is to go and participate in the madhouse that is the RNC. Today was the main day where we took care of all the business. The first thing that happened is 3 days of scrambling strategy in order to get all the signatures in to get Ron Paul in nomination on the ballot. And this is where the campaign utterly failed us, because none of us knew any of this. The campaign could have had us working on this for months before the convention. I also had a little run-in with several of the campaign staff a couple days ago. So this all leads up today, getting Ron Paul entered in a nomination. To do that, you have to get the majority of the delegates in 5 states to sign a nomination form asking for him to be put in nomination. This is not voting for him. This is just asking him, this is getting him on the ballot. We got 6 states. Wayne Terhune from Nevada, one of our oath keepers, also the Nevada delegation chair, was instrumental in this effort. We jumped through all the hoops, we complied with all the rules, we crossed the I's, dotted the T's, and we got everything turned in time. The first item of business was credentials. There were several credentials issues regarding Maine. Morton Blackwell, a very powerful Republican expert and very respected, well-respected in the RNC, was on the bus with the Virginia delegation. Mysteriously, the Virginia delegation was sent to circle the Tampa Bay Times Forum for 2 hours until the meeting was over. That would have seated the Maine delegation and a couple of other states.
Oh, hold on 1 second. So what happened in Maine?
What happened in Maine was Romney and his people were up to their dirty tricks as usual. So we ran a fair convention and we got 95% of the delegates. 2 weeks before the convention, 2 people that were not elected as delegates and were obviously upset about it, filed a challenge, formal challenge to the seating of those delegates, alleging that there were improprieties. They were running the convention, they ran all the committees, and one of their charges to the credentials committee for the RNC was that somehow it was the Ron Paul delegates' fault that the credentials committee at the state level was run in a sloppy manner, even though the people that were complaining about it were the people that were running the committee. And the RNC, led by, let's see, who is I can't remember the credentials chairperson. But anyways, we made our arguments, and the credentials committee voted to not seat the Maine delegation, as well as Oklahoma and a couple other states.
So they allege improprieties. Were there anything actually factual, or is it a bunch
No,
of vague
the alleged improprieties were all committed by the Romney campaign. You had practices such as busing in of non-delegates to filter in and then provide a voice voting strength. You had false slates being passed out, which had a couple of Ron Paul names in it, but the rest of them were establishment people to throw people off and to confuse them. You had, of course, the Louisiana hijinks where Alex Helwig of the Louisiana State Central Committee was arrested because he was offering a motion, and while in police custody, his fingers were broken. Also, the police arrested another guy and dislocated his hip in the process.
You're talking about the state level, right?
Louisiana?
Yeah, state level.
But now you had, how many states did you have where Ron Paul came out with a dominant majority from the states, but then when they got here they were decertified? How many did that happen to?
3 or 4 states.
3 or 4. So Maine was one of them. Which
Maine was another one. Oklahoma was one of them. Oregon was another.
So coming into the convention, they
Right.
thought they were good to go.
Right.
Okay.
And then what happened was the challenges by the establishment people were effective. So then you had a lot of people who had paid all the money taking off time off of work, got to Tampa, and then they were told you're not going to be seated. So they were basically watching from the sidelines while a slate of establishment people was handpicked by the RNC to take their place.
Well, but if there's problems, improprieties with the way the delegates were selected, then why wouldn't they decertify all of them?
Because the idea is not to.
Well, I know, but I mean, how do they justify only decertifying the Ron Paul people? I mean, in Maine, only the Ron Paul delegates were decertified.
No, the whole delegation was decertified.
Okay, so that's how they did it, and then they brought in their alternates, which were mostly Romney people.
Right.
Okay, gotcha.
Right, and they picked the alternates.
Ah,
So
okay.
they picked. The Group B was the legitimate set of delegates, and then Group A was the hand-picked group of delegates. So getting to credentials.
Now, what about tell us about Virginia again? So the other ones were blocked by this dirty tactic of decertifying them.
Well, in Virginia, Morton Blackwell was on the bus with the Virginia delegation, and he was supposed to show up at the credentials meeting, but they had the bus circle around the Tampa Bay Times Forum where the actual convention was held for about 2 hours until the meeting adjourned.
Oh, keeping him out of the credentials meeting. Gotcha.
So then, when the meeting adjourned, then all of a sudden they were allowed to pull up to the Tampa Bay Times Forum and disgorge their passengers.
So they were detained.
Basically, yes, that's exactly right. Indefinitely detained. Well, detained for 2 hours.
What does he say about this?
I don't know. Haven't read that he said anything about it publicly yet, but I imagine that he will have something to say about it in the next few days. So credentials was none of it went our way, so we're basically stuck with what we had. But we still had the 6 states filled out to put Ron Paul into nomination. So the credentials committee heard everything and then said no. So the first thing they do is they bring up the credentials report so they can certify everybody that is sitting in as a delegate. So they say the credential report is complete, we believe it's a good report, and we urge its adoption. And then he says, if, hearing no objection, and then everybody jumps up and starts screaming division, call of the, roll call, and that is to avoid them taking a voice vote. Because you want them to count every vote, because you've also got people in the audience that are screaming too. They're not delegates, but they're adding to the volume because they're there. So we were yelling division, yelling roll call, but none of it does any good because the chair controls all the microphones. It's completely different from district and state conventions where the microphone switch is right there. The chair has a bank of switches that he controls the microphone. So if he doesn't want you to talk, you're not talking, even if you're the delegation chair. So Steve Munisteri, who is our state chairman, was not allowed to address it. And it's kind of funny if you think about them telling the chairman of the Texas, he's the chairman of the Texas GOP. He runs the Republican Party in Texas, the most important state, and he was not allowed to talk. So there's nothing he could do. So we could yell division all day long and nothing would happen because we're yelling for him to do division, but he cannot turn the mic on in order to call for division or roll call. So he's had several run-ins with the RNC, and as a result, they placed us an hour outside of Tampa as punishment. That's where the delegation stayed. So credentials was passed over the objections of hundreds of delegates in the audience. The next section was rules, and the rules committee chairman is John Sununu, otherwise known as Pig Eyes. And if you look at him, you can see why he's called Pig Eyes. He has a reputation for being a real ruthless political enforcer. So he was brought in to make sure the rules went the Romney campaign's way. So some of the rules that were passed, which are, in my opinion, the Republican Party committing suicide, were when you elect the national delegates at the state conventions, the delegates there elect other delegates to be national delegates. So the state delegates elect their representatives in Tampa. And so that's the will of the people, right? But one of the rule changes was the candidate would have the ability to handpick the delegates. So no matter what the people in the congressional district voted, he would be able to overrule them at a whim. So if you were not being sufficiently Romney-tastic, then you get booted. If they heard anything bad about you, you can get booted. So you very shortly have a situation where Romney can hand out delegate spots as political favors for contributions. He can hand them out to his donors, his buddies, his business associates. He can hand them out to anybody because anybody can be kicked off of the delegation had a whim. The second thing that they passed was that if you're bound to a delegate and you even sign to place someone in nomination, not voting for them on the nomination, just merely vote to place them into nomination, then you will have judged to be resigned as a delegate. And then they frog march you out of the building because now you have no credentials because you're not a delegate anymore. Another thing they did was they raised the number of states you need to put a nomination in from 5 to 7. So they're raising the bar to make the price for entry that much higher.
Well, they also knew you had 6, right?
Right.
So they made it one more. They changed that here just in one day, today?
No, that rule came out in the proposed rules. We had a bag with a bunch of literature in it, and the rule book was one of them. So they changed to 7. It was 5 for a while, but they changed to 7 in order to make the bar higher. But we were operating under the 5-state rule until today.
Well, they knew going in that you had changed 6 states, right?
I don't know if they knew going in that we had 6 states.
No?
They knew that we were going to get 5. They probably did some strategizing. They said, well, we're pretty sure they can get 5 states. Well, they need to get 6. Can they get 6? Anyway, 7's the number. So what this does is this completely eliminates the incentive for the grassroots to participate in local, state, and federal and national conventions, because what's the incentive to spend all this time working for the party if you can get selected as a delegate and then it gets yanked for no good reason? Now, if you're a Romney supporter, you got lucky this time. Next time, what if you're a Romney supporter and it's Santorum who's leading the charge, then he can have everybody who's even a shade of a Romney supporter kicked out on a whim. So you shouldn't gloat if you're a Romney supporter and you got to go to the convention, because whoever the candidate is next time, they can they can clean house. I did a Politico interview in which I referred to this practice as a Stalinist purge, which it is. They clear out everybody who is not 100% ideologically committed to the candidate. So
That is totally true.
that removes a lot of the grassroots participate.
To their chosen candidate.
Right. So you'll have these monolithic blocks of delegates that are robots for whoever is the leading candidate or for whoever wins that state. So that was the Rules Committee, and of course John Sununu introduced the resolution, said this is a good resolution, I urge we adopt it. Now, of course, we jump up and down, and this was a good fight because this affects everybody, and it wasn't just the Ron Paul people who were against this. Almost everybody was against it, and so when he said, what are the ayes and nays, almost everybody in the House was against it. You could clearly hear that the nays had it. But if you look at the picture of the TV screen that serves as a teleprompter, okay, this is a picture of the television screen that serves as a teleprompter. This is where the script of the RNC comes from. Every word that is spoken by Chris Christie or John Boehner or Reince Priebus comes off of this screen, including the results of the votes while they're being voted on. So what would happen is, on this screen, John Boehner would read, do I hear a motion? It's seconded. Are there any objections? Hearing no objections because I don't want to hear you. What is how does the body move? So then you vote aye or nay. But while you're still voting, on this screen, it's coming up, in the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. And
Before you're even done voting.
Right, before we're even done voting.
Right.
We're still voting, and it's already coming up here for him to say the ayes have it.
Right.
So, in effect, you're the live studio audience at a soap opera or a WWF exhibition or a reality show.
And the applause text there is what they pop up before they start clapping, or?
That is, yeah, it's basically, it's just like the Tonight Show.
You're a signal to applaud.
Right.
Right.
And the people can't see that, right? Only the.
Well, you can if you turn around and look.
Okay.
I mean, it's not hidden. It's a 52-inch flat screen
So
TV
it's-
like you have. It's like that TV right there.
And so it's visible for people to
Right,
kind of see
right.
what's going on.
What it's But see, the thing is, they put it right there in the open because they figure that most people are too stupid to look around and figure out what's happening. They're not going to put two and two together. For example, the people in the Texas delegation, they're going to say, "Oh, I don't like that rule," and they're going to see the nays come in, and they're going to see the chair just ignore them, and then, but there's no thought process that happens. Hey, maybe they shouldn't be doing that. They're just like, "Oh well, it didn't pass," even when they can hear very clearly that the nays have it, and then they need to do either a division or the motion fails. So they hear it and they say, "Oh, that didn't pass," and they go back to talking about whatever they're going to talk about. So that, and then in nominations, of course, Wayne Terhune was not allowed to put Ron Paul in the nomination. So the only time he got to say anything is when he had to report the delegates from each state. He said, Wayne Terhune from Nevada, we're the Silver State, we have all these counties where all this awesome stuff happens, and we're glad to deliver so many votes for Ron Paul, who also got a majority of the delegates in Minnesota, Iowa, Oregon, and a couple other states. That's the only way he was able to say that we got the majority in the 6 states.
And it was all Ron Paul except for 5 votes for Romney.
Right.
So that he swept that state, swept
Yep.
Nevada.
He also
and yet
swept
when the lady switched the microphone and goes 5 Romney.
Yeah.
It was really weird.
And also, Ron Paul won the popular vote in Virgin Islands, but they still reported it as for Romney.
Because he won the majority of delegates.
He won the majority of the vote, the popular vote in Rhode Island. So he should have got all the delegates. But the way they read it out is he got 1 delegate in Rhode Island and Virgin Islands, and and Romney got 9.
Wait, so in the Virgin Islands, it's all pure popular vote?
Well, that's how they calculate everything in all the states. And so they said, well, you didn't win the popular vote, so Romney gets all the delegates. But in the Virgin Islands, he did win the popular vote.
Well, some states have caucuses.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, some states have the popular vote and caucuses at the same time. So the nominations ended, and of course we yelled division, roll call, all that stuff. But it's like I said before, it's like we weren't even there. They might as well have cardboard cutouts of us sitting in chairs.
So it was a show trial.
It was a show trial. It was definitely a show trial
Yes.
with the predetermined outcome already there.
Like you said, like in the Soviet Union.
Exactly. So then when the over the top happened, everybody cheered like he won. It was weird because there's nobody else to compete with. They're just calling out numbers, and then they call that over the top, and everybody went nuts. So then they got their mid sign, they started dancing around in the aisles while the music was playing, and my mom was in the guest section, and she looked down at them and she said, "You fools, you utter deluded fools."
So let me ask you this. So given this,
Yep.
what this really means is that from now on, does it make a difference how effective the campaign is? Does it make a difference how big the support for the candidate is?
Right.
Because they run the rules, when they decide who's going to be their candidate, that's who's going to win.
Exactly, and another wrinkle is they passed another rule that says that further invalidates, if you could do it any further, here it is, further invalidates grassroots participation. You're supposed to meet every 4 years at the RNC, and you're supposed to set the rules for the party. Another rule they passed was that after the RNC adjourns, sine die, right?
Right.
Then the RNC can come back at any time and change the rules however they want to. So the delegates that are supposed to actually set the rules at conventions, the RNC can come back later and just change them at will to whatever they want to.
Sure.
So if we voted on, well, we need to take it down to 5 states again. That's an acceptable bar for you to be placing nomination for a presidential nominee. 6 months later, the RNC can come around and say, well, we're just going to put it back at 8 states. RNC votes on it, and that's it. So again, the will of the delegates is completely eliminated. So what this means is it removes any incentive on the part of the grassroots to participate. And that's where all the money comes from. That's where all the time, the boots on the ground, the labor that comes from is grassroots volunteers.
It's even worse than that. What it really means is that the political process now is a farce. That the idea that you're electing, the people themselves are selecting the candidates for the party are a farce.
Well, it's always been a farce, but what's changed now, it's blatant. What we've succeeded in doing is pulling the mask off of all this and showing the world.
Right, that's what I mean. It
What's going
confirms.
on.
It confirms.
Right.
It makes it irrefutably confirmed that the electoral process now is, like you said, a show trial.
Right.
It might as well be Nazi Germany
Right.
or Stalinist Russia.
So now you go back to the Tea Party and you say, all the time and the money you spent to send me to Tampa, all the conservative values you wanted me to push in Tampa, none of it mattered because all we were spectators. We had no input or participation possible into the whole process. Everything was scripted down to the last letter, and all you do is sit there and either say aye, aye or nay, but either way you vote, the predetermined outcome will be assessed. So this is really going to hurt the Republican Party's grassroots efforts. Going to hurt their donations because when we go back to our Tea Parties, and Tea Parties are a lot of the groups that send us there, we'll be able to tell them everything that I'm telling you. That basically, and this is a quote from Ben Ginsberg, Romney's chief lawyer, the changing of the rules to allow the candidates to handpick their delegates, in the words of Ben Ginsberg, was a problem that we needed to fix. So the people in the congressional districts and the state conventions being able to choose their own delegates is a problem that the Romney campaign decided to fix.
In other words, doing what they're sent there to do,
Right.
which is to be a delegate.
Right. That was a problem that had to be fixed. So now there will be clone-like, zombie-like ideological blocks of delegates with no individual thought. Because if you display, even if you are prone to not agree with the candidate on something, if you display any sign of disloyalty to the candidate, then you'll be booted, and someone that's more amenable to the candidate will be put in this place.
It's kind of like communist China or the Soviet Union, where everyone's in the party,
Right.
but only the party can run on the ballot, and only the party's chosen
Right.
candidates get selected.
That's
so
correct.
It's a total farce.
But it
correct.
has to
Why do you
spread
belong to a
beyond
party?
us now,
Yeah.
What's the point?
Yeah. So the solution is they would like nothing more for us to go away and never be seen from again. That would be their wet dream. So I'm not inclined to give them that satisfaction. So my intention is to work for local parties and candidates because people have been saying for a while now that focusing all your attention on Washington and national elections is a waste of time. We need to focus in on our local elections that are outside of the control of the RNC. So, like state house representatives, focusing on getting them elected to their state house is an excellent move because who's going to introduce militia legislation? Who's going to introduce constitutional sheriff legislation? Who's going to introduce nullification legislation? Local state representatives. So that's where we need to focus our efforts, is getting those guys elected, because then they can actually make differences in states.
Go to liberty-candidates.com. Isn't that Gigi's website? To find out Liberty candidates in your area.
Well, one wrinkle on that is that even in the states, even at the state level, I've seen, because I did some research back in 2008 on the legal landscape with this, and just so folks know, legal challenges aren't going to work in the current case law because the courts have ruled that these are private organizations that can do pretty much whatever they want.
Right.
They don't follow their own rules. The federal courts are not going to step in and try to enforce their own rules.
Right.
So which I disagree with. I mean, they're running elections, and so this would seem to be election fraud to me.
They like to have it both ways.
Yeah, they're a private organization, but they pick a public
Right.
government institution.
And there are also many state laws that govern what the parties do. So they're NGOs basically. They're non-governmental organizations.
But even at the state level, I've seen situations where the state was taken over by upstarts in the eyes of the party, and the party will then decertify and wipe the slate clean of that in Nevada. Wipe the slate clean of everyone and all the central committees and all the counties and the state committee. Just clean them all out and start all over again with their own operatives.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
So we're becoming a country where you no longer have any kind of actual role or voice in self-government.
Right.
The
Unfortunately.
fact that it's right out there and no one notices. I mean, that's
The average person doesn't know.
Hopefully that people, there's going to be more stories of people coming back. What you brought up is that, what are they going to do? Kill all you people when you leave? No, you're going to go back and you're going to talk to other people who are clearly active within your local area, and they're going to be frustrated.
The people that are delegates that want you to sit down and shut up because you're ruining their convention, those are the people that are the dinosaurs. They're older. They're stupid.
They're old. They're weak.
They're very shallow. They're very shallow. And so, if you try to explain, and these are white people in their 50s and 60s. If you try to explain the concept of natural rights to these people, they would look at you like you had 6 heads, or their eyes would glaze over. They're completely, they're not able to be educated or rehabilitated or taught anything of liberty concepts that we take for granted. I was thinking while I was watching them dance around their signs, I was trying to think of how it would feel to be bereft of all the knowledge I have from being in the liberty movement so long, and how it would be to live on such a simpler intellectual level. It would be kind of hard to fathom that.
So in some ways, it's really actually kind of silver lining, frankly, because what this really does is it removes the false sense of self-government and pulls away the veneer and
Right.
kind of it makes the government more legitimate. This is government's already abandoned the Constitution, and frankly, with the support of a lot of these same knuckleheads.
Right.
So why not expose it as being illegitimate? Even to the average person who doesn't understand the principles of constitutional, highest law of the land kind of thing.
Right.
For those who worship democracy, this shows this is as far as even according to their paradigm.
Right.
Cool.
Yep.
Anything else you want to say?
Nope.
I'm glad I wasn't there. I don't want to choke some fuckers out. Don't